Silver hair catches evening light as Elliot Harrison sits at his weathered oak desk, trembling fingers unfolding the letter he retrieved from his mailbox moments ago. The familiar scent of his late wife's roses drifts through open windows, mingling with freshly brewed coffee now growing cold. Property transfer complete, the document reads. His vision blurs, the first tear falling directly onto his signature, forged clearly not his own. 40 years of financial expertise recognizes the betrayal instantly. A framed photo of last Thanksgiving's family gathering watches accusingly from his desk, Claire's smile now haunting. His shoulders begin to shake, silent sobs rising as he clutches the paper, decades of trust collapsing in black ink. Has family betrayal ever blindsided you like this? Share your story below. Like if this pierces your heart, follow to witness Elliot's fight for justice. Outside, rain begins, gentle drops against windows, mirroring tears on lined cheeks as darkness falls. Rain pelted Elliot Harrison's shoulders as he stood before his family home, suitcase handle cutting into age-spotted fingers. The porch light, the one he'd installed 30 years ago, cast weak yellow pools on unfamiliar garbage bags lined neatly at the gate. Something wasn't right. His key slid into the lock, but wouldn't turn. He tried again, metal scraping metal. Again. The familiar motion, home from volunteer work, unlocked door, Friday night routine for 42 years, suddenly foreign. Must be the wrong key, he murmured, voice thin against the rain's patter. But the keychain held only 3 keys: home, car, safety deposit box. A financial advisor never misplaced important keys. A white envelope, plastic wrapped against the rain, hung from the doorknob. His name in Claire's handwriting. Elliot's fingers trembled as he pulled it free, rain mixing with something warmer on his cheeks. "Dear Dad," it began, "it's time you enjoyed your independence." Words blurred. Independence. Arrangements made. Senior living options. Assisted care. The world tilted. Elliot steadied himself against the door, his door, that wouldn't admit him. He moved to the nearest garbage bag, methodically opening it despite the rain. Inside, his clothes folded with military precision. Another bag, books from his study. A third, framed photographs, one cracked across the glass. His face separated from Claire's by a jagged line. How could she do this? My own daughter. Elliot traced the crack with his thumb, remembering the day it was taken, Claire's business opening. He'd co-signed the loan, proud of her entrepreneurial spirit. Now his belongings sat discarded in the rain like forgotten trash. The photograph trembled in his hands. Decades of dignity kept his shoulders straight, even as the first sob caught in his throat. 65 years of controlled emotions crumbled with the home's security. He sank slowly to the porch steps, clutching the broken frame. Rain soaked through his coat, his shirt, to skin that had weathered far worse storms. But those had been external tempests. This betrayal came from within the walls he'd built, maintained, protected. He fumbled for his phone, dialing Claire first. Voicemail. Jennifer next. Voicemail. Martin. No, not his brother. They hadn't spoken in years. Finally, Walter, poker buddy with a spare room. Elliot? Walter answered, surprise evident. Back already? Walter, His voice cracked, decades of professional composure deserting him. Something's happened. While explaining, Elliot noticed a glossy corner protruding from a torn bag. He tugged it free, a real estate listing. His home, interior photos he didn't recognize, dated 2 weeks before his trip began. His tears stopped abruptly. The financial advisor's mind clicked into gear, recognizing the pattern. This wasn't impulse. This was premeditated. A car slowed on the street, headlights illuminating his rain-soaked figure among the garbage bags. Friend or foe? In this moment, Elliot couldn't tell the difference anymore. Walter's spare room smelled of mothballs and disuse. Elliot placed his suitcase, the only luggage not soaked through, beside an unfamiliar twin bed that would certainly aggravate his back. The ceiling's hairline cracks formed a map of strange territory, nothing like the familiar patterns he'd watched for decades from his own bed. "It's not much," Walter said from the doorway, avoiding Elliot's eyes, "but it's yours as long as you need it." The unspoken qualifier hung in the air, as long as isn't too long. "I appreciate it," Elliot replied, straightening his shoulders. 40 years advising clients through financial crises had taught him that dignity was sometimes all one had left. He unpacked methodically, banker's precision transforming chaos into order, shirts folded, toiletries arranged. The broken photograph frame placed carefully on the nightstand, its crack a constant reminder. Through the apartment's thin walls came Walter's hushed phone conversation. "I don't know how long. Claire said he's been confused lately. No, I haven't seen anything. But why would she?" Elliot's hands stilled, confused. He who had managed millions for clients until retirement 3 years ago, who still balanced his accounts to the penny. He reached for his phone, dialing Jennifer. His younger daughter answered on the 4th ring. "Dad, is everything... Are you okay?" Something in her voice, caution, fear, made him pause. "I'm at Walter's. Did you know about this arrangement?" Unnatural silence. Background whispers. "Claire said you agreed to it," Jennifer finally answered. "The assisted living tour, remember? You said the house was too much now that Mom's gone." Elliot's grip tightened on the phone. "I never toured any facility. I never agreed to anything." "Dad." Her voice softened to the tone one uses with confused children. "Claire has the paperwork with your signature." The call ended with promises to speak tomorrow. Hollow words, Elliot thought, setting down his phone with trembling fingers that had never betrayed him before. He opened his banking app, searching for the mortgage payment that should have processed automatically last week. Status: payment canceled. Authorization: account secondary user, Claire Harrison. The room's unfamiliar shadows lengthened as Elliot sat rigid on the bed's edge. These tears were different from those at the porch, controlled, angry, sliding silently down weathered cheeks. He wiped them away with a steady hand, financial investigator's mind already cataloging discrepancies. A notification appeared on his phone screen, a property listing for his address. The date? Exactly 2 weeks before his volunteer trip began. Interior photos showing empty spaces where his belongings had stood for decades. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't concern for an aging father. This was premeditated. Elliot glanced at his watch. A Timex. Nothing fancy. Banks would open in 12 hours. Walter's borrowed alarm clock ticked loudly in the silence, each second marking time toward something that felt dangerously like a reckoning. From his suitcase, he retrieved a small notebook and pen. The financial advisor who had protected clients from fraud for decades began making his first notes on the case that mattered most, his own. The First National Bank lobby hadn't changed since Elliot's retirement 3 years ago. Same potted plants, same landscape paintings. Same marble counters where he'd once been welcomed with respectful nods. Today, he waited while younger customers received immediate attention. 40 minutes later, a manager finally approached. Not his former colleague Michael, but a younger man with an apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Brandon Lee. How can I help you today?" The lowered visitor chair forced Elliot to look up at Brandon across the glass-topped desk, a power dynamic not lost on a man who'd advised clients on subtle negotiation tactics for decades. "I need to review my account authorizations," Elliot said, voice steady despite the night's broken sleep. "And recent transaction history." Brandon's eyes flickered to his computer screen. "I see your daughter Claire is listed as an authorized user, added 2 weeks ago." "Show me the authorization form." A hesitation. "Sir, these changes are typically—" "The form, please." 40 years of financial authority returned to Elliot's voice. Brandon retrieved the document, sliding it across the desk. There it was, his signature authorizing Claire's access, except it wasn't his signature. Close, but the final loop in Harrison curved upward instead of down. A forgery any document examiner would catch immediately. "This isn't my signature," Elliot said quietly. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps you forgot." "I did not forget authorizing my daughter to cancel my mortgage payments or list my house for sale while I was volunteering." Elliot's knuckles whitened against the chair's armrest. "I need copies of all authorization changes made in the past month." The manager glanced at his watch. "That will take some time too. I have all day." An hour later, Elliot sat in his car, manila envelope of documents beside him. The evidence was clear: signature forgeries, account access changes, mortgage payment cancellations, all while he taught financial literacy to disadvantaged youth in another state. He called Claire's office, steeling himself. "Dad," her voice carried practiced concern. "I was just about to call. How was your first night at Walter's?" "Why did you change my mortgage payment schedule?" Silence, then. "We discussed this. The memory specialist said you might not remember our conversations about downsizing." "What specialist?" "Dr. Levine, last month. You were having those episodes of confusion." Elliot had never met any Dr. Levine, had experienced no episodes of confusion. The gaslighting was textbook. He'd warned clients about such tactics from financial predators for years. "Claire, I want to meet today. I have back-to-back meetings, but I could today." After hanging up, Elliot methodically compared the forged signature against his own from his driver's license. The forgery was good. Family members knew signatures best, but not perfect. In his wallet, he found Martin's business card, untouched for years. His brother would know Claire's financial situation better than anyone. The thought of breaking their silence after so long made his chest tighten. But this wasn't about old wounds anymore. This was about justice. Tears no longer threatened. The betrayal had crystallized into something harder, more focused. Elliot started his car, the financial investigator's mind already mapping his next moves with precision born of decades catching those who thought themselves too clever to be caught. Claire's office suite occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, sleek, modern, expensive. Elliot noted the contrast to the modest family home she was so eager to sell. The receptionist's eyes widened at his approach. "Mr. Harrison, I didn't know you had an appointment today." "I don't." He settled into a lobby chair with a clear view of Claire's office door. "I'll wait." The receptionist's whispered phone call wasn't subtle. Within minutes, Claire emerged, performance-ready in designer clothes and practiced concern. "Dad?" Her embrace felt rehearsed. "You should have called first. I have meetings all afternoon." "This won't wait." His voice remained even as she guided him into her office. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased city views. Digital family photos in expensive frames lined her credenza. Older versions of him, he noticed, none from the past year. A wall calendar showed his volunteer trip dates circled in red. "Dad, I'm worried about you," Claire began once they were seated. "Walter called. He said you were confused about the living arrangements. The arrangements where I was locked out of my own home while volunteering, where my belongings were put in garbage bags. We discussed this extensively." Claire's voice softened to the tone nurses use with difficult patience. "The memory specialist said you might resist the transition." "What memory specialist?" "Dr. Levine." "We had 3 consultations." She leaned forward. "You agreed the house was too much since Mom died. You signed the assisted living paperwork." Elliot placed the bank documents on her desk. "Like I signed these account authorizations?" Claire barely glanced at them. "Of course you signed them. We went to the bank together last month." "The signature is forged, Claire." Her composure wavered for just a moment. "Dad, these memory lapses are exactly why I found the real estate listing, dated 2 weeks before my trip." Elliot kept his voice steady. "The trip you encouraged me to take, that you arranged." A knock interrupted them. A colleague poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but your 2 o'clock is waiting." Claire's transformation was immediate. Concerned daughter on full display. "I'll just be a minute, Susan. My father is having one of his difficult days." The door closed. Elliot noticed a bankruptcy warning notice partially visible beneath Claire's planner. The pieces began to align. "Your business is failing." Not a question. "That's ridiculous. We're expanding next quarter." "Then why forge my signature to access my accounts? Why sell the family home behind my back?" "Dad, you're not well." Claire stood, signaling the meeting's end. "I've scheduled an evaluation with Dr. Levine tomorrow. Walter will drive you." "I'm not going to any doctor you've invented." Elliot rose, gathering his documents. "And I'm not confused. I'm angry." He left, ignoring Claire calling after him with practiced concern for witnesses in the reception area. In his car, Elliot finally released the emotion he'd controlled throughout the confrontation. His fist struck the steering wheel once, hard. A single, angry sob escaped before he regained composure. He scrolled through his contacts to Martin's number. 3 years of silence since their argument about mother's care. He pressed dial. "Elliot?" Martin sounded genuinely surprised. "Is everything okay?" "Claire's trying to sell the family house. She claims I'm having memory issues." Silence then. "She told me you were diagnosed with early dementia, that you agreed to assisted living." The final confirmation of Claire's systematic deception. "She told everyone but me, apparently." "Look, Elliot, if Claire says, 'She forged my signature, Martin,' she's selling our family home without my knowledge." Elliot's voice hardened. "Whatever's between us doesn't matter now. This is about the truth." The call ended with Martin unconvinced, leaving Elliot more isolated than before. He started the car, mind racing through options. Claire had methodically cut off his support system, creating a narrative of his decline that even his brother believed. What she hadn't counted on was that the financial advisor who had protected clients from fraud for 40 years was now focusing all his expertise on her scheme. As he drove away, Elliot didn't notice Claire watching from her office window, phone to ear, expression calculating rather than concerned. Saturday morning baseball had been Elliot's ritual with his grandson Tyler for 3 seasons. He arrived at the familiar field, the bleachers already filling with parents and grandparents, clutching coffee thermoses against the morning chill. Tyler's team warmed up, their navy uniforms bright against the green diamond. Elliot spotted Jennifer first, her posture stiffening when she saw him. Beside her, son-in-law Robert whispered something, and Tyler's younger sister Emma suddenly needed Jennifer's full attention. 10-year-old Tyler jogged toward the bleachers, then halted mid-stride when he saw Elliot. The boy's hesitation, like approaching a stranger, not the grandfather who had taught him to throw a curveball, cut deeper than any locked door. "Grandpa?" Tyler glanced back at his parents, uncertain. "Just came to watch you play, buddy." Elliot kept his voice light, though his heart hammered. "Big game today." Jennifer approached, steering Tyler back toward the field. "Dad, we didn't expect you. Tyler needs to warm up. I always come to his games. Maybe next time would be better, after things settle." Jennifer's voice dropped. "Claire told us what happened at her office. The doctor said consistency is important right now." "What doctor, Jennifer?" "There is no doctor." Robert joined them, positioning himself slightly between Elliot and Jennifer like a shield. "Elliot, we agreed as a family that this transition would be easier with clear boundaries. I never agreed to anything. See, this is exactly—" Robert shook his head. "The memory issues Claire mentioned. You were at the family meeting last month. You signed the care plan." Elliot's world narrowed to Tyler's confused face, watching this exchange from the dugout. The boy who had spent countless evenings in Elliot's workshop now looked at his grandfather with something like fear. "Tyler's up to bat soon," Jennifer said, retreating. "We'll call you tomorrow, Dad, when you're feeling more yourself." Elliot stood alone as the game began, watching his grandson step up to the plate. He'd taught Tyler that stance. The boy hit a clean single, and Elliot's instinct was to cheer, but Tyler looked to his parents for approval, not to the grandfather now viewed as unstable. After 3 innings of being studiously ignored, Elliot left, the weight of invisible eyes following him to the parking lot. Walter's apartment offered no comfort. His friends' nervous glances and carefully neutral questions about other housing options made it clear this arrangement had an expiration date. Claire had been busy. The senior community center, his last refuge, fell silent when he entered. His usual chair at the poker table now held glossy pamphlets, memory care options, recognizing early signs of dementia, supporting loved ones through transitions. Diane, the center director, approached cautiously. "Elliot, we've missed you at the financial literacy workshop." He gestured at the pamphlets. "Seems my expertise is in question these days." "Claire mentioned you might be taking a break from teaching." Diane's eyes held something unreadable. She thought familiar routines might be overwhelming right now. The coffee in his regular mug grew cold as Elliot attempted conversation with his poker group. Their responses, overly loud, excessively simple, exchanging glances when they thought he wouldn't notice, told him everything. Claire's narrative had reached every corner of his life. Later, Elliot parked across from his family home. The "For Sale" sign stabbed the front lawn like an accusation. Through windows that had witnessed 40 years of his life, he could see Claire directing workers who carried more of his belongings out to a waiting truck. For the first time since this nightmare began, Elliot allowed himself to fully break. Not the quiet dignity of tears on the porch steps, not the controlled anger in the car after Claire's office. This was surrender, heaving, gasping sobs of a man watching his life being systematically erased by someone he had loved and trusted completely. From a nearby car, unseen by Elliot, Diane observed his breakdown, her expression shifting from concern to calculation as she reached for her phone. Ever felt completely abandoned by those you trusted most? Share your experience below, like if this breaks your heart, and follow to see if Elliot finds his way back from this darkness. Elliot, would you stay a moment? Diane Chen's voice stopped him as the senior center emptied after Monday's sparsely attended chess tournament. 3 days since the baseball field. 2 days since he'd left Walter's apartment for a budget motel after the awkward suggestion that he explore other options. 1 day since Claire had left 3 voicemails about Dr. Levine's availability. Elliot paused, expecting more pamphlets about memory care. Instead, Diane gestured toward her office. "I could use your financial expertise," she said, loud enough for lingering members to hear, then lowered her voice. "And I think you could use some allies." Her office door closed behind them with a decisive click. "You're not experiencing memory issues," Diane stated flatly. Not a question. Elliot studied her. Former high school principal, center director for 5 years, always direct. "No, I'm not." "I didn't think so." She gestured to a chair. "Claire has been quite thorough in her narrative. You've noticed. Hard not to when someone suddenly contacts every organization an elderly parent frequents with the same concerning story." Diane's expression softened. "I saw you outside your house Saturday. That wasn't a man with dementia. That was a man being systematically isolated." The unexpected validation nearly undid him. Elliot swallowed hard, maintaining composure through decades of professional habit. A knock interrupted them. Marcus Bedford, retired attorney from Elliot's poker group, entered without waiting for response. "Got your text," he told Diane, before nodding to Elliot. "Figured it was about this situation." Before Elliot could process this development, 2 more familiar faces appeared: Sylvia Washington, retired detective, and James Chen, Diane's husband and former bank manager. "What is this?" Elliot asked as they settled around Diane's desk. "The Tuesday night poker group has some questions about Claire's story," Diane explained, "particularly after James spotted your son-in-law at the casino again last weekend." "Robert has a gambling problem?" James nodded grimly. "One that's escalated significantly in recent months, the kind that might make a family desperate for cash." Elliot's financial investigator's mind clicked into high gear. "Claire's business is struggling. I saw bankruptcy warnings in her office. And suddenly you're confused and need to sell your fully paid home," Marcus added. "Convenient timing." The room transformed as Diane cleared her community calendar from the wall, replacing it with blank paper. "Start from the beginning. What exactly happened when you returned from your trip?" For the next hour, Elliot methodically laid out the events: the locked doors, forged signatures, bank documents, family alienation. His hands, trembling for days, steadied as he traced financial transactions on papers spread across the desk. "Classic isolation technique," Sylvia observed. "Cut off support systems, create a narrative of incompetence, then swoop in as the concerned caretaker." "I've seen it in financial elder abuse cases," Marcus added, "but usually not by immediate family." "Unless they're desperate," James noted. "Claire's business loan is underwater, Robert's gambling debts are mounting, and they're sitting on a fully paid property worth about $450,000 in this market," Elliot finished. "Plus my retirement accounts." His phone rang unexpectedly. Martin's number. Elliot stepped aside to answer. "Claire called me again," Martin said without preamble. "Wants me to sell my portion of Mom's lake property. Says you agreed to sell yours." "I haven't spoken to her about Mom's property." Silence then. "She showed me paperwork with your signature agreeing to sell." "Another forgery," Elliot said. "She's done several." I thought she might be lying, Martin admitted. She seemed too rehearsed. I recorded our conversation. Thought you might want to hear it. Something long frozen began to thaw between the brothers. The investigation headquarters expanded over the next 2 hours. Financial documents covered the walls. Transaction timelines stretched across windows. Diane's whiteboard tracked Claire's movements through bank records James could access. Sylvia's detective skills uncovered Robert's gambling debts. Marcus's legal expertise identified multiple forgery counts. For the first time in days, Elliot felt the fog of helplessness lifting. His expertise, dismissed by his daughters, was valued here. His observations, treated as confusion by Claire, were recognized as evidence by this makeshift team. When tears came, they were entirely different from the desperate sobs in his car. These were tears of validation, of recognition, of hope emerging from despair. We need to move quickly, Marcus advised, consulting property records. The sale is in final stages, less than a week before closing. You're not alone in this fight, Diane said, squeezing Elliot's shoulder. Claire picked the wrong senior to underestimate. The phone rang again. Martin, with unexpected news that would change everything. Marcus Bedford's home office embodied old-school legal authority, leather-bound law books lining mahogany shelves, grandfather clock marking time with resonant chimes, documents organized in color-coded folders. The perfect war room for the confrontation now less than 24 hours away. Everything in place? Elliot straightened his tie, meeting his reflection in the antique mirror. The man looking back stood taller than he had a week ago, silver hair neatly combed, shoulders squared. The financial advisor who had protected clients for decades had returned. All set, Marcus confirmed, reviewing their strategy once more. I've reserved the conference room at Littleton Palmer for 10 tomorrow morning. Neutral territory with recording capabilities. Claire confirmed? Elliot asked. Her assistant called back this morning. Claire believes it's a mediation session about your transition to assisted living. Marcus's mouth tightened. She's bringing their family attorney. Good, Elliot nodded. Better to have witnesses when everything comes to light. The team had assembled one final time before tomorrow's confrontation. Each had contributed expertise born of decades in their respective fields. Sylvia's investigative techniques, James's financial analysis, Diane's organizational skills, Marcus's legal strategy, and now, unexpectedly, Martin's crucial evidence. The grandfather clock struck 3, each chime heightening the sense of countdown. Let's review what we know. Elliot moved to the timeline they'd constructed on Marcus's dining room wall. Claire's business has been failing for at least 8 months. Loan default notices began 6 months ago. Around the same time, Robert's gambling debts escalated. Sylvia nodded. Casino records show he's down over $120,000 this year alone. 3 months ago, Elliot continued, Claire began laying groundwork, telling family, friends, and community organizations I was experiencing memory issues. 2 months ago, she arranged my volunteer trip, then immediately listed the house. James pointed to the bank records. She forged your signature on account access forms, transferred funds to cover Robert's most pressing debts, and altered your mortgage payment schedule to create a default scenario. Meanwhile, Martin added from his seat by the window, she approached me about selling Mother's Lake property, claiming you had already agreed to sell your portion. The brothers' eyes met briefly. 40 years of banking had taught Elliot to recognize when bridges were being rebuilt, however tentatively. The scheduled closing on your house is Friday, Marcus noted, which explains her urgency to have you officially declared incompetent. Once the house sells, the money would be much harder to recover. Diane organized the evidence folders with principal's precision. Each allegation supported by documentation, multiple forgery counts, financial elder abuse, fraudulent property transfer, potential conspiracy charges depending on her attorney's involvement. Elliot paused at the last folder, containing his grandchildren's artwork and photos, carefully separated from the legal evidence, Tyler's baseball tournament schedule, Emma's crayon drawings. The personal stakes in this legal battle. "Are you sure about this approach?" Martin asked quietly. "There are less confrontational options." The question gave voice to the doubt Elliot had wrestled with each night. Claire was still his daughter, despite everything. His grandchildren would still have to live with the consequences. "I've considered alternatives," Elliot replied. "Private resolution, family counseling, even walking away." He touched the photograph of Tyler and Emma. "But this isn't just about the house or money. It's about truth, about consequences for actions. What lesson do my grandchildren learn if this deception goes unchallenged?" Martin nodded slowly. "You always were the moral compass of the family." The unexpected acknowledgment hung between them, decades of silence finally breaking. "I should have called you when Mother was ill," Martin said, meeting Elliot's eyes directly. "My stubbornness cost us years." "We both made mistakes," Elliot replied, "but that's not what matters now." The clock chimed the quarter hour, pulling them back to the task at hand. "Final assignments," Marcus directed. "Sylvia will document Claire's arrival. James will track any last-minute financial movements. Diane will coordinate with Jennifer, who's agreed to attend after seeing the evidence yesterday. I'll handle legal proceedings." "And I," Martin said, "will be sitting beside my brother, where I should have been all along." They raised coffee cups in silent toast. 5 retirees and 1 estranged brother, an unlikely alliance against financial predators who had underestimated their collective expertise. As the others gathered their materials, Elliot found himself alone before the window, watching evening shadows lengthen across Marcus's garden. Tomorrow would change everything, for better or worse. Justice would be served, but at what cost to family relationships? Would his grandchildren understand someday? "Second thoughts?" Martin asked, joining him. "Just weighing consequences," Elliot admitted. "Claire will likely face legal penalties." "She made her choices," Martin replied. "Just as we make ours now." Elliot straightened his tie once more. Decision reaffirmed. The grandfather clock chimed again, counting down to confrontation. Outside, the setting sun cast long shadows as Elliot and Martin walked to their cars, brothers in step for the first time in years. Whatever tomorrow brought, Elliot would face it with dignity intact and allies beside him. A different kind of family formed in crisis. In his motel room that night, Elliot placed the final evidence in his briefcase, then removed the family photograph that had been cracked on that rainy porch. The jagged line across the glass still separated him from Claire, but now it seemed less a wound and more a boundary, necessary, protective, clear. Tomorrow would bring truth to light, whatever the cost. Has someone you trusted ever forced you to stand up for yourself? Comment your experience, like if you're standing with Elliot, and follow to witness his moment of truth. The conference room at Littleton Palmer projected neutral authority, polished mahogany table, leather chairs, discreet recording equipment mounted in corners. Elliot arrived 30 minutes early, arranging evidence folders with the precision that had defined his career. Each document labeled, each allegation supported, each betrayal documented. Martin stood at the window, tension evident in his squared shoulders. "She's here," he announced, watching the parking lot, with Robert and someone in a suit, probably their attorney. Elliot straightened his tie. Years of client meetings having trained him to present calm confidence regardless of inner turmoil. The team took their positions. Marcus at Elliot's right with legal documents, Martin at his left representing family solidarity, Diane and Sylvia flanking them with supporting evidence, James at the end monitoring financial activities in real time on his laptop. The door opened precisely at 10:06. Claire entered first, professional composure in place, though her eyes widened momentarily at the assembled group. Robert followed, eyes darting nervously around the room. Their attorney, a sharp-featured man in his 40s, assessed the situation with narrowed eyes. Last through the door was Jennifer, who had finally reviewed the evidence yesterday. She stood apart from Claire, uncertainty evident in her posture. "Dad," Claire began, voice calibrated to concerned daughter pitch, "I'm glad you agreed to this discussion. Dr. Levine thinks these transitions are best handled openly." "There is no Dr. Levine," Elliot replied evenly. Just as there were no memory consultations, no assisted living tours, and no agreements about selling the family home. Claire's attorney stepped forward. "Mr. Harrison, I'm David Mercer. I understand this is a difficult time, but we have documentation of your agreement to—" "Forgeries," Marcus interrupted, sliding copies of the bank's forensic analysis across the table. Multiple documented instances on bank authorizations, property transfers, and power of attorney forms. Claire's composed facade flickered. "Dad, we've discussed your memory concerns for months. These accusations are exactly why the family is worried." "Which family?" Elliot asked, opening the first folder. "The family you told I was mentally declining. The family you prevented from contacting me directly. The family you manipulated into supporting your narrative while you emptied my accounts and sold my home." He laid out bank statements showing transferred funds, account access changes, and canceled mortgage payments, all dated after Claire gained unauthorized access. "You arranged my volunteer trip, then immediately listed my house," Elliot continued, voice steady as he presented the real estate timeline. "You packed my belongings in garbage bags and changed the locks while I was away. You told the senior center I needed memory care. You told Walter my stay was temporary. You told my grandchildren to be careful around me." With each statement, he placed another document before Claire. Her performance began to crack, eyes darting to her attorney, who was reviewing the evidence with growing concern. "These could be misunderstandings," Claire attempted. "Dad's been confused since Mom died." "Claire." Jennifer's voice cut through the tension. "Stop. I've seen the evidence." The sisters locked eyes across the room, a silent battle of wills, until Claire looked away first. "Your business is failing," Elliot stated, presenting the bankruptcy warnings Sylvia had uncovered. "Robert's gambling debts exceed $120,000 this year alone. You needed money quickly, and I was the most convenient source." Robert flinched, color draining from his face. "You don't understand." "I understand completely," Elliot interrupted. "What I don't understand is why my daughter chose fraud over simply asking for help." The door opened unexpectedly. A man Elliot didn't recognize entered, nodding to Sylvia. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Detective Wilson. Ms. Washington contacted me regarding the evidence you've gathered." He surveyed the room. "This could constitute criminal fraud and elder financial abuse." Claire's attorney whispered urgently in her ear. She straightened, composure cracking further. "This is a family misunderstanding. My father's condition—" "Stop." Martin spoke for the first time, sliding his phone forward. "I recorded our conversation about Mother's Lake property, Claire. You claimed Elliot had already agreed to sell his portion." "Another lie." Claire's eyes darted between her uncle's, realization dawning that her narrative had completely collapsed. "Dad," she began, voice dropping the performance for the first time, "you don't understand how desperate—" The door burst open again. Claire's husband, Robert, staggered in, face ashen. "Claire, they've frozen the accounts. All of them. The casino's calling in the markers." Their attorney closed his eyes briefly, professional composure barely intact. "Mr. Harrison, perhaps we could discuss this privately, without law enforcement. That opportunity existed before my daughter forged my signature, sold my home, alienated my family, and attempted to have me declared incompetent," Elliot replied evenly. Tears welled in Claire's eyes, genuine for the first time. "What happens now?" Elliot placed one final folder on the table. "Two options. First, criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and financial elder abuse. Potential prison time for both of you." Claire visibly flinched. "Second," Elliot continued, opening the folder, "a structured repayment plan. Mandatory gambling addiction treatment for Robert. Financial oversight of your business. Supervised visitation with my grandchildren. And," he met Claire's eyes directly, "complete honesty with everyone you've deceived about my mental state." "You'd do that?" Claire whispered. "After everything?" "You're still my daughter," Elliot said, a single tear finally escaping despite his control. "And Tyler and Emma still need their mother. But there must be consequences, Claire. And boundaries." Detective Wilson collected evidence copies while Marcus explained the legal agreement. Jennifer moved to stand beside Elliot, a silent apology in her eyes. Martin's hand rested briefly on his brother's shoulder, family reconfiguring around truth rather than deception. As Claire signed the agreement, her hand trembling, Elliot felt no triumph, only a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. The financial advisor had won. The father had both lost and gained. "The house sale?" Claire asked quietly. "Canceled as of this morning," James confirmed from his laptop. "Fraud investigation pending against the real estate agent who knowingly listed without proper authorization." When it was over, Elliot stood in the hallway, emotions finally threatening to overwhelm his carefully maintained composure. The victory felt hollow yet necessary, like setting a broken bone, painful but essential for proper healing. Martin joined him, wordlessly offering a handkerchief. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" Elliot asked. "They might never forgive me." "You offered mercy alongside justice," Martin replied. "The rest is up to them." Through the conference room window, Elliot watched Claire and Robert in hushed, intense conversation, their world forever altered. And behind him, his new allies, his chosen family, waited to help him rebuild what had been so deliberately torn down. The reckoning was complete. The healing could begin. The key slid into the lock and turned smoothly. Elliot stood on his own threshold, hand resting on the doorknob, momentarily unable to step forward. After 3 weeks in a motel room, after the confrontation, after the signed agreements and legal consequences, this simple act, entering his own home, felt monumental. Behind him, Martin waited patiently, understanding the significance without need for explanation. The brothers had developed that silent understanding over the past weeks, decades of estrangement giving way to a new, careful alliance. Elliot pushed the door open. The house smelled musty from disuse, dust particles dancing in afternoon sunlight streaming through windows. Some furniture remained, though Claire had removed many items before the confrontation stopped the process. The familiar and unfamiliar mingled in unsettling ways. "Home sweet home," Elliot murmured, setting down his suitcase in the entryway. Martin placed a supportive hand on his shoulder, It will feel normal again soon. They toured the house together, cataloging what remained and what needed replacing. Claire and Robert had taken most of the electronics, kitchen appliances, and newer furniture, items they would now have to return or replace as part of the restitution agreement. The more personal items, photo albums, Elliot's collection of financial texts, his late wife's garden journals, had been boxed haphazardly in the garage. In the kitchen, Elliot ran his hand along the countertop where Sarah had taught Claire to bake cookies 40 years ago. The contradiction still ached. How could the small girl who had stood on a step stool here, flour on her nose, become the woman who had orchestrated such betrayal? "It's going to take time," Martin said, seeming to read his thoughts. "For all of you." The restitution agreement had been signed 2 weeks ago. Claire and Robert would repay every dollar taken from Elliot's accounts. Robert had entered gambling addiction treatment the following day. Claire's business was under financial oversight. Most importantly, they had begun the painful process of correcting the false narrative about Elliot's mental state. Uncomfortable conversations with family members, friends, the senior center, and Tyler's baseball coach. The hardest part had been explaining to Tyler and Emma. Jennifer had brought them to the motel 3 days after the confrontation, the children wary and confused. "Grandpa isn't sick?" Tyler had asked, brow furrowed. "No, buddy. I never was." Elliot had explained the situation in age-appropriate terms. Mommy and Daddy made bad choices because they needed money, told stories that weren't true, but were now making things right. Emma, only 7, had climbed into his lap, studying his face. "You don't seem different to me." That simple acceptance had nearly undone him. Now, standing in his kitchen, surrounded by half-empty cabinets, Elliot faced the practical reality of rebuilding. The legal battles were largely settled, but the emotional landscape remained complicated and raw. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Outside stood Diane, James, Sylvia, and Marcus, arms loaded with groceries, cleaning supplies, and a large potted plant. "Housewarming," Diane announced, bustling past him into the kitchen. "Or re-housewarming, I suppose." The group moved with comfortable efficiency, having planned this intervention. James stocked the refrigerator, while Sylvia unpacked new dishes to replace those taken. Marcus set up a small stereo system, filling the house with classical music. Diane arranged the potted peace lily from All of Us at the center on the dining room table. "The poker game resumes here next Tuesday," Marcus informed Elliot, setting out a new card table in the den. "If that suits you." "I'd like that," Elliot replied, throat unexpectedly tight. By early evening, the house had transformed, not back to what it was, that would never be possible, but into something new, fresh groceries in the refrigerator, clean sheets on the bed. Martin's suitcase in the guest room where he would stay until the guest house renovations were complete. As dusk approached, Elliot heard another car in the driveway. Jennifer stood uncertainly on the porch, Tyler and Emma fidgeting beside her. "Dad," she began hesitantly, "we wanted to welcome you home." Elliot knelt to embrace his grandchildren, their small arms around his neck, anchoring him to what mattered most. "I made you this," Emma said, presenting a hand-drawn card. "For your refrigerator." Tyler shuffled his feet. "Can we still do baseball on Saturdays?" "Nothing would make me happier," Elliot assured him. Jennifer hung back, guilt still evident in her posture. "Claire told me to tell you she's completed the first financial literacy course, part of her restitution." "Good," Elliot nodded. "And how are you?" "Processing," Jennifer admitted. "It's a lot to take in, what she did, what we all believed." "It will take time," Elliot echoed Martin's earlier words, gesturing for her to join them inside. The evening unfolded with unexpected warmth. Jennifer helped prepare a simple dinner. The children explored the half-familiar house, asking innocent questions about missing items that Elliot answered without bitterness. The senior center friends shared stories and laughter. Martin, so long absent from family gatherings, found his place sitting at the table as if he'd never been gone. After dinner, Elliot and Martin sat on the newly repaired porch swing, coffee cups steaming in the cool evening air. The garden below, neglected during the turmoil, would need considerable work. Sarah's roses had grown wild, but stubbornly continued blooming. "I've been thinking," Martin said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Maybe we should plant some vegetables alongside Sarah's flowers. Tyler and Emma might enjoy learning to garden." "A family project," Elliot nodded. "I'd like that." From inside came the sounds of Jennifer helping the children prepare for departure, Diane packaging leftover food, Marcus and James discussing the stock market. A new kind of family, part blood, part chosen, forming around shared experience rather than obligation. The porch light illuminated an envelope on the side table, Claire's first restitution payment delivered by certified mail that morning. The legal consequences continued their prescribed course. Claire and Robert would face significant financial penalties. Their attorney was under investigation for potential complicity in the fraud. The real estate agent had lost her license. Yet alongside justice ran the tentative thread of potential reconciliation. Not today or tomorrow, but someday, if Claire's actions matched her promises, if the restitution became more than financial. "You know," Martin said thoughtfully, 40 years in banking taught me something important about investments." "What's that?" Elliot asked. "The best ones aren't always financial." Martin gestured toward the house where their newfound family gathered. "Sometimes they're in people who show up when it matters most." The grandfather clock in the hallway, returned yesterday from Claire's apartment, chimed 9 times. Each resonant tone marked not just the hour, but a reclamation of time itself. The hours ahead were Elliot's again, to spend as he chose, with people who recognized his continued competence and worth. As Jennifer prepared to leave with the children, Elliot walked them to the car. Tyler hung back for a moment. "Grandpa, can we work on my curveball tomorrow? I have a game Thursday." "Of course," Elliot promised. 4 o'clock? The boy nodded, then hesitated. "Mom said you might teach me about money stuff, too, like you used to teach kids at the center." "I'd be honored," Elliot said, unexpected emotion welling. His expertise, so recently dismissed, still held value to those who mattered most. After they departed, Elliot returned to the porch where Martin waited. The evening had grown cool, stars emerging in the darkening sky. The brothers sat in companionable silence, the porch swing creaking gently beneath them. Tomorrow would bring challenges. The home still needed restoring. The garden required attention. Claire would eventually make her first supervised visit. There would be difficult conversations and uncomfortable moments. The betrayal's echo would reverberate for years. Yet sitting there in the gathering darkness, Elliot felt something he hadn't expected to feel again so soon: peace. Not the naive peace of before, but something more hard-won and precious for having been lost and reclaimed. Inside, the senior center friends prepared to leave, having accomplished their mission of transitioning the house from empty shell to home again. Diane paused at the door. "Financial literacy workshop Wednesday?" she asked. "The seniors have missed your expertise." "I'll be there," Elliot promised. As headlights disappeared down the driveway, Elliot remained on the porch, taking in the neighborhood he'd nearly lost. The elderly couple across the street waved from their window. They'd sent a welcome home card yesterday. The Sullivan children next door had offered to mow his lawn until he was settled in again. Small kindnesses forming a safety net he hadn't known existed. From his pocket, Elliot withdrew the small notebook where he'd begun documenting Claire's betrayal weeks ago. Its pages now held different notes: plans for a senior financial protection seminar, ideas for helping others recognize the warning signs he'd missed, thoughts on rebuilding family bonds with clearer boundaries. The betrayal had revealed weakness, but also uncovered surprising strength in himself, in forgotten friendships, in new alliances. The painful lesson would now serve others, transformed from personal tragedy to community resource. Elliot closed the notebook and stood, ready to rejoin his brother inside. The porch light illuminated the path forward, not back to what was, but ahead to what could be, built on foundations both old and new. The kitchen smelled of coffee and fresh-baked bread when Elliot woke on a Saturday morning 6 months after returning home. Morning light spilled across the refinished oak table where Martin sat, newspaper spread before him, a routine now comfortably established between the brothers. "Tyler's game at 11, Martin reminded him, pushing a steaming mug across the table. "Jennifer's picking us up at 10:30. Elliot nodded, taking his place at the head of the table, a position that once felt threatened, now reclaimed with quiet certainty. The home around them had transformed, not back to what it was, but into something new. Fresh paint in the living room, Martin's books on shelves beside Elliot's. The den rearranged to accommodate Tuesday night poker games that had become a neighborhood institution. Through the window, he could see Sarah's rose garden, now tended by unexpectedly gentle hands. Tyler and Emma had claimed sections for vegetables, their weekend visits including garden lessons alongside financial ones. Even Claire, during her monthly supervised visits, had begun helping with the weeding, small, literal steps toward repairing what she had damaged. The doorbell announced Diane's arrival for their weekly planning session. The financial safety for seniors workshop they'd developed had expanded to 3 community centers, with Elliot's story, anonymized but powerful, serving as its cautionary foundation. "Morning, gentlemen," Diane greeted them, setting down a folder of participant feedback. "We had 30 seniors at yesterday's session. 2 identified suspicious activity in their accounts after the warning signs discussion." Elliot felt the familiar satisfaction of purpose renewed. The betrayal that might have diminished him had instead been transformed into protection for others. "That brings us to 12 potential frauds prevented," he noted, adding the information to his tracking notebook, the same one that had once documented his daughter's deception. The grandfather clock chimed 10, its familiar resonance filling the house that had so nearly been lost. Its return from Claire's apartment had been part of the restitution agreement, now faithfully maintained for 6 months. Each payment arrived on time. Each required financial literacy course completed. Each family narrative corrected with difficult honesty. Reconciliation remained a careful, measured process. Claire and Robert attended weekly counseling. The grandchildren visited regularly with Jennifer, occasionally with Claire under Martin's watchful presence. Trust rebuilt in small increments, a birthday remembered, a promise kept, truth maintained when falsehood would be easier. Elliot's phone lit up with a message from Marcus about next week's elder protection testimony before the state legislature. Their advocacy group, formed from the crisis response team, had drafted legislation strengthening protections against financial exploitation. The betrayal's echo now reached toward positive change beyond one family's healing. As Jennifer's car pulled into the driveway, Elliot caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. The face looking back had weathered profound betrayal, yet emerged with dignity intact. The pain hadn't disappeared, it had transformed, becoming wisdom to share, boundaries to maintain, compassion tempered with caution. Tyler burst through the door first, baseball glove already on his hand. "Grandpa, Coach says I'm starting pitcher today." Emma followed, proudly carrying the savings register Elliot had helped her create. "I saved $3 more this week. That's 47 total." Elliot embraced them both, these innocent beneficiaries of hard-won lessons in truth and consequences. Through the open door, he saw Jennifer waiting by the car, and beyond her, the neighborhood where he'd rebuilt his place, the retired financial advisor now known not for his victimization, but for his resilience. "Ready for the game?" Martin asked, joining them at the door. Elliot nodded, stepping across the threshold he had once found locked against him. The house stood solid behind him, its foundation strengthened rather than weakened by the storm it had weathered. The family moved forward together, reconfigured, wiser, bound by truth rather than pretense. Some betrayals leave only destruction in their wake. But sometimes, if we're fortunate, they reveal the hidden strength of what remains, and the unexpected beauty of what can be built anew.